Say life is what you make it. So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day. No matter what the weather say, life is like a record, so just let it play.
Good
Hello,
morning,
everyone.
Sorry,
welcome.
Matt, I'm stepping on you.
Welcome back to episode number 4 of BDE. It's obviously still a little bit of a work in progress, but we appreciate you guys joining us. And I am 99% sure that we're live on Rumble right now. So I would love it if you guys are watching this on Rumble. Please leave us a comment, because I think it is the future of video on demand and live streaming. And so it's definitely important to us that we have a large presence there. But yeah, anyways, circling into the first half of the show, where we love to cover just a handful of different news stories. We've got a lot to go over with you guys today. So we're going to be talking about the New York Times and how a right-wing conspiracy they talked about yesterday, or I think it was on the 3rd actually, but within 24 hours, we went from a right-wing conspiracy about election data information to it actually just turning out to be completely true. So we're going to get into that as well. We're going to be talking about paying by credit cards going to cost you a lot more in Canada unless you're in Quebec. And the United States government just dropped $290 million buying anti-radiation drugs. I'm sure that that's nothing. And then finally, we're going to talk about digital ID specifically here in Canada. So there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm excited to do so. But before we do that, let's just kind of check in. How are you doing, Adam?
Yeah, excellent, Matt. As you're reading off those kind of headlines that we're going to be cruising through today, I'm not sure if my day is going to get any better. I think maybe I've started at the top and it's downhill from here, but hopefully we can still have some fun on the show.
All right. Well, a couple of quick updates I wanted to share with you guys, just kind of building upon actually a handful of stories we had yesterday. Is I want to do a quick follow up on the discussion about whether politicians can actually just speak in plain language. Unfortunately, according to this story and what I saw, it seems like that's probably not going to be the case. So let's pull up the screen share here. And yes or no, Polyev grills Trudeau on whether the IRGC is a terrorist organization. And now this is in relation to, I'm probably not going to get it exactly right, but I think it's the Iranian Republican Guard. I forget what the C stands for. But essentially, Pierre Polyev is a Canadian politician here who's famous for essentially trying to frame questions that he puts to the prime minister or others on the the majority party here in Canada, as yes or no. And Adam, I don't know, did you actually watch this clip or did you see it?
Actually, I got stuck behind a paywall on this. So, Matt, if you wouldn't mind sharing with the audience again your little trick for getting over these quick paywalls or ad block
Absolutely.
things.
If you guys are unfamiliar, it's a little bit less successful now because more and more platforms and websites are putting in additional barriers. But 12ft.io, it stands for 12-foot ladder, is a fantastic way to get around the basic paywalls that you often encounter on like news articles and things of that nature. But this story here is from the Western Standard, but I actually just saw it on my Twitter timeline. And Pierre Polyev essentially was literally asking what the headline reads, yes or no. And of course, Trudeau dances around the subject matter. He won't completely condemn them and he won't support them either. Obviously, right now, there's what appears to be we're on the cusp of a revolution potentially in Iran over, civil rights, women's rights, and things of that nature. And to me, this is just so frustrating for a multitude of reasons. My biggest complaint here is with Justin Trudeau. But secondly, I actually have a complaint about Pierre Polyev. So the first complaint is, Justin dances around this, doesn't answer the question. Pierre asks a second time, yes or no. And again, Trudeau avoids answering the question in a yes or no format. Now, understandably, when it comes to geopolitical situations, if you are the leader of a country, particularly a G7 country like Canada and Justin Trudeau is, I understand why you might not want to paint yourself into a corner. However, I actually want to push back on Pierre Poilievre as well, because I think we all knew that Justin Trudeau is incapable of answering a yes or no question. And so Pierre just focuses on trying to like beat him on this, like beat him down with this question again and again. I think that this is just trying to play to his supporters, right? To his political base. And I get that, but I think that a more effective manner would be for Pierre to ask a yes or no question, get the deflection from Justin Trudeau, and then essentially build upon that and actually lay out why it matters. So he never actually says, like, what are the implications if Trudeau says yes or no? So I would much rather see the follow up from Pierre be something like, well, if you answered yes, then Canadians and Canada should take further steps to punish this government, right? If we're going to frame it as a terrorist organization. If it's not, then we should actually probably step back a little and, try and put less pressure on Iran and at least lay it out for the average, Canadian, why this matters at all, why he's pushing so hard on Justin Trudeau in regards to the subject matter. Instead, it just feels like he's focused on scoring political points. So that frustrates me a little bit. Secondly, on our culture jamming story, this article from Louder with Crowder came out. I just thought it was absolutely perfect what we were talking about yesterday. So watch. Mom dresses like drag queen at school board meeting to make point about what's appropriate for kids. And I can tell you right now, I don't care that she's a biological female. I don't care if she was a biological male. This is inappropriate, in my opinion, to be in front of children through the school system, at least, right? If you want to take your kids to drag classes or drag shows on your own time outside the school system, well, that's your problem, I guess, in my opinion, versus this. This just seems completely inappropriate. And you can see here, she's literally dressed almost identically to a drag performer that did go up in front of children. And this just frustrates me to no end. Like, this just seems so dramatically inappropriate in my opinion. And yet, I want to give huge props to this mom because, one, I honestly think this takes a lot of courage to, one, just even be willing to dress like that in front of a school board meeting. And secondly, I think this will get far more attention than had she started, getting signatures, right? Or had she protested in front of the school. This is the sort of thing that can go viral, right? This is a meme in and of itself right here. So just any quick hot takes here, Adam, on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that stands out to me about this image, and especially for those people that are watching on the road or whatever, this mother is wearing sort of like a unitard type outfit, but she also has a lady beside her holding up a poster of the actual drag person that was at the school and performing in front of the children. And this one-piece outfit that she's wearing is accompanied, at least in the photos, of the actual drag person with like latex boots or something. But on face value, okay, I get it. It's definitely a scandalous outfit. But what's far more scandalous is the image right beside the person full frontal. And that is an image of this person in drag in a one-piece unitard. Okay, you do the math on this, having a fully spread legs and then with their hands planted on the ground. So the image is shot from the rear. So if you're just driving right now and you try to picture this, I'm talking like latex boots, thigh high, a one-piece suit that's disappearing on its own accord into the body, essentially, of the person in drag. And this is very evidently on a stage. And so I think that is where, regardless of your thoughts on this topic, this is definitely not an environment that would promote, learning, higher education. I'm not seeing very many maths being discussed here, science, biology.
Well,
come on.
Maybe the question was something like, if this person spreads their cheeks, how many cheeks do they have?
Yeah, moving at at a height of 6 feet tall and a weight of 200 pounds. If they spread their cheeks, how far will the unitard go? I don't know. This seems extremely inappropriate to me, Matt.
And the fact that this even has to be a discussion to me just shows me the moment in time we find ourselves in history. It's just absolutely wild. It's honestly absurd. This is clown world. This is the age of hilarious, in my opinion. And I think to a certain extent, you have to laugh at this a little bit or else you will honestly drive yourself crazy. I think that this is just another great example of how we need to focus on the local, right? So if you're a parent, if you're an aspiring parent, if you're a grandparent, you need to start paying attention to what's going on locally in your school board and start participating there, right? We had that story earlier on in the week that I find extremely concerning, that 20% of municipal elections essentially go unchallenged, resulting in individuals that are technically running to be voted in that just by default get voted in. I don't think anyone should ever be voted in by default, right? Like, let's at least put up a turtle, a dog, a cat, something like that to run against an individual. And again, I just want to give huge props to this mom, because I really do believe that that took a lot of courage to stand up in front of the school board and do this presentation to dress in that manner. But that's how you get attention, right? I don't think had she just started a signature campaign, we'd be talking about today. It wouldn't have got picked up by Louder with Crowder, and this would have just fallen on deaf ears. And that's extremely unfortunate. But again, a great highlight to why culture jamming is just so important, in my opinion. So that was kind of a couple of quick updates in regards to some stories we covered earlier in the week. And again, I encourage you guys, go back and watch those videos. But let's move on to the next story here. And this is our WTF story of the day. I understand if you think the last one should have been the WTF story. I get where you're coming from. Honestly, I swear I do. But this one drives me just as crazy, honestly. And it's the very clear partisanship that we get in Canadian mainstream media these days. The Toronto Star, I'm no fan of them. And yet, honestly, back when I was in university, and, sadly, this is more than a decade ago now, we used to get free newspapers. And I loved reading the Globe and Mail. I loved reading the National Post, and I loved reading the Toronto Star. And I felt between those three newspapers at that point in time, I was actually becoming relatively well informed. These days, though, the partisanship just bleeds through these newspapers, in my opinion. And Toronto Star, which is the largest newspaper in Canada, I think is one of the worst actors in this regard. So I want to share this political cartoon that was in the Toronto Star. And to me, it just shows exactly where the mentality are of these, I don't know what else to call them, but elitists, right? And I believe that most of these elitists lean left. But for anyone that's not able to see the cartoon I'm showing, it essentially shows a trucker that's got a tree that's fallen down on his truck. His truck says Dictator Trudeau, Tyrant Trudeau, Arrest Trudeau, and he's wearing a T-shirt that says Jail Trudeau. And he's now saying, "I need your help, pal." And then there's Justin Trudeau with a giant bag that says Fiona Aid. For anyone that doesn't get the reference here, this is obviously in regards to the tropical storm, the Fiona hurricane that hit the east coast of Canada and did massive damage, right? A friend of ours and someone we follow on social media, Brad Mills, he's got a property out there. He's been showcasing it on his IG stories, and I've really enjoyed following along. And yet, I just want to say, like, this to me is just so frustrating for a multitude of reasons. And I'm just going to highlight some of the reasons that this upsets me so much. One, first of all, everyone that's out east isn't inherently an anti-Trudeau supporter, right? So, like, first things first, let's get that very clear, right? Just like you can't say all of Alberta hates Justin Trudeau. So I'm sure that there's Justin Trudeau supporters that have been negatively impacted by this tropical storm. Secondly, whether or not you support the prime minister should have nothing to do with whether you receive aid from your government in times of emergency, right? This is one of the few reasons that you could actually kind of convince me that maybe government's not always terrible, is that they can step in at times of emergency and quickly act to try and, repair and restore infrastructure. But let's say that every single person that needed aid from the government right now on the East Coast absolutely hated Justin Trudeau. Let's say they're the exact people that he framed as racist, misogynist, and anti-vaxxers and anti-science. I still don't care. It's wild to me that our media will bend over backwards to throw all the money to Ukraine, and we know that Ukraine, at least some of that money goes to the Azov battalion, which has very extreme views, right? Which I think you could easily argue is Nazi or Nazi affiliated in a lot of their views. And yet the idea that Canadian taxpayer money might go to support Canadian taxpayers is somehow like deserving of this troll. It to me shows how disconnected these elites are at these local papers. I'll pause my rant here. Adam, do you want to jump in with any perspectives?
Yeah, I actually had a really interesting thing to add to this, which was actually a comment that was shared just below it. If you
Okay.
could pull that up.
Yeah.
So I've got the link there. And this guy goes, you know what? We fixed this meme, or we fixed this article here, and here's the solution. And the speech bubble now reads, "We don't need your help. We got this. What's in the bag?" And all they've changed is the person in distress's speech bubble and the bags that Trudeau is carrying. And now, instead of hurricane aid, Trudeau's carrying in the World Economic Forum. And I think that's hilarious, and think that we're going to be covering a little bit more about the World Economic Forum in an article coming up here. But I thought it was great. And your rant is bang on, man. And honestly, I think perhaps it's coming through a little bit on the show, Matt, that perhaps you're not a huge supporter of Mr. Trudeau.
Yes, absolutely. But I just want to highlight here because, fact checkers are going to jump in. If you didn't know, Marty up north, he's actually a misogynist, a racist, and anti-science because he's the individual that obviously is a Russian actor that started the I'm a Canadian campaign, right? Remember when we had all those viral tweets? He's literally the original one that said, like, this is who I am, post the selfie photo, and I'm the person that Justin Trudeau says is all these things. So again, obviously, we can't take anything he says at face value because he must be Russian propaganda. Last thing I want to highlight here in regards to this general discussion. Oh, maybe I forgot. Okay, here it is. Is this Deadline article. And this is another huge complaint I have with the Toronto Star. I believe I covered this I guess I didn't cover this when it originally broke, but I shared it on social media. So the Toronto Star, Canada's largest online news site, has admitted the headlines fronting an article that spotlighted antipathy towards the unvaccinated was a mistake. And specifically, this is the headline that honestly should have got all government funding, in my opinion, revoked from the Toronto Star the moment they posted this. For those of you that can't read the caption, this was on the front page of the Toronto Star, and I literally think that this was as close to a dog whistle as you could expect them to be capable of executing on against anyone that didn't want to get vaccinated, against anyone that didn't want to have their medical choices made for them by the government. If an unvaccinated person catches it from someone who is vaccinated, boo-hoo, too bad. I have no empathy left for the willfully unvaccinated. Let them die. I honestly don't care if they die from COVID, not even a little bit. Unvaccinated patients do not deserve ICU beds at this point. Like, I remember when I saw this and I literally got chills, and honestly reading it now, I'm getting chills again because this is just from some random person on Twitter, right? And the Toronto Star seeks out this information, put it on the front page of their newspaper, the widest distributed newspaper in Canada, in order to provoke these sort of sentiments, right? I literally do think that this is a dog whistle, and this should have been completely unacceptable, and this should have been a much bigger scandal in Canada than what we actually saw. So I don't want to spend too much time on it, but any quick thoughts here? Do you remember originally seeing this headline, Adam?
Yeah, and I actually do think that that's freaking despicable. And there were hundreds of millions of COVID tweets. By the way, you can do a quick Google search to even just research how many tweets and what the discourse was like around COVID. And this is the tweet. This is the actual headline they decided to run. And I think it's unbelievable because a lot of Canada's population decided not to get vaccinated. And especially in the earlier days before they started really applying pressure by, having you lose your job or restricting travel throughout the country. So I think that, it's really quite horrifying to see that. And for anybody watching, continue reading down below in our description of today's news events, because we're going to get further into the Orwellian world that we're living in. So it's a little bit creepy. I really don't like that headline. I think it's dangerous. And one of the things that's brought up later when they try and sort of pull that back is the idea that it could so easily be misinterpreted and what some of the consequences of that are, particularly by directly antagonizing the unvaccinated and almost pitting the vaccinated against them. Spreading that mindset of oh, they're unvaccinated, so they're taking up my ICU beds or the ICU bed that was dedicated for my family and friends that are sick. That is so dangerous and has such cascading deep problems that can actually lead to violence and all sorts of hate crimes. So I don't like it. It's shocking.
Yeah, it honestly blows my mind. And just kind of the last thing I want to say on the subject matter is, if that's really what we want as a society, fine, so be it. But I don't have to pay taxes anymore if you're not going to give me medical care, right? Like that's arguably one of the only justifiable things about where Canadian taxes go right now. I just wanted to highlight this comment from Al. Appreciate you jumping in the comment section. The Toronto Star is despicable, pompous, and acceleratingly irrelevant. And I don't detect any lies there. I don't know if you detect any lies, but that definitely passes my my lie detector.
Yeah, no, I'm really happy. And by the way, shout out to Al, who mentioned in the comments that he's listened to every single one of our episodes up to this point and is now engaging with the conversation. So really appreciate having you here, Al.
All right. Well, before we jump into today's 4 stories that I want to cover, let's just go over a couple of daily recommendations because, again, there actually is great content out there. Not every content creator is as bad as the Toronto Star is. And so I want to highlight, and I forget, it might have even been our buddy Dan, or maybe you, Adam, mentioned this video to me, but I absolutely loved it. So Liver King was on Graham Stephan's podcast, The Iced Coffee Hour. And I've seen video clips of Liver King, right? If anyone's unfamiliar, this is the dude that's often eating like raw meat, right? It appears that he eats, an inordinate amount of liver, and appears to be in fantastic shape, right? He's always doing these physical feats and challenges, and I kind of thought that that was his shtick. However, in this interview, like he's very well spoken, very thoughtful, very methodical. He's been very successful in business, or that's what he said on the podcast. And I was just overwhelmed with his perspective and what he kind of explains or describes on this podcast episode is how he became the Liver King. And a big aspect of that, in fact, was actually through him. Him and his wife, they had a dentistry practice, and they wanted to figure out how they could proactively try and help people to not have issues with their teeth. And they realized that a human body is actually a relatively closed system. It's inputs and outputs, right? And so what you consume is eventually who you become, right? In addition to your individual actions. And so again, it was so much better than anything I could have imagined. And he was so much more thoughtful than I expected. So fantastic episode. Really encourage you guys, seek it out. You can find it on YouTube and other podcast platforms.
Yeah, sorry, Matt. I got lost there on the screen because I absolutely need our viewers to understand who this man is. You're giving a recommendation from a gentleman that looks like this. Are you kidding me? Look at this guy. I'm absolutely going to go and listen to this episode after that.
And then one last thing that was just kind of interesting. One, they got Graham to eat like liver and stuff on the video, and anyone that knows Graham knows that that's not an easy feat. So that was fascinating in of itself to see Graham trying to not retch or spit it up. But in addition, he actually shared like some of his personal practices. He sleeps in like a EMF tent in order to keep
Wow.
electromagnetic fields out of him and his wife's bedroom, right? He doesn't shower. So he lives like on waterfront property and he'll go for a swim or whatever, but he literally doesn't shower, doesn't cut his hair, doesn't cut his beard or anything like that. And it's just, I'm not saying that that's the way everyone should live. I'm not saying that's the way anyone should live, but it's fascinating to get to peer into these individuals' lives and perspectives. And I feel like there's a lot of value in what he laid out in that podcast episode.
Yeah, at the very least, I assume we're putting some really sketchy chemicals on our bodies every time we go in the shower and use like a shower gel or something like that, or a shampoo. I was actually looking at one of my deodorants this morning and there's way too much creepy stuff in there that I can't.
Terrible.
Well, I can't say, and it's allegedly one of the more natural ones. And I'm like, well, none of this sounds natural. Actually, in fact, most of this sounds creepy. But we'll move right along onto my daily recommendation. And that's actually going to be a book from Jordan B. Peterson, who has recently got a lot of attention for speaking, I guess, against some of the Canadian politicians and bringing to light perhaps maybe some more practical ways that the Conservatives could run their party, as well as sharing a lot of information about what can go wrong in the world if we don't pay attention to some of these things. And one of the reasons why I wanted to share Jordan B. Peterson's first book here, or it's the first in a sequel, first of two, I guess. He's got two books. So there's the 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. And that's the one I want to direct people to. There's also a sequel called Beyond Order. And that's another set of rules that I haven't actually gotten around to reading yet. But in preparation to reading that book, I picked back up the 12 Rules for Life book. And I guess what I wanted to really highlight out of this book and some of the takeaways are that everything is actually in your control. So if you're not feeling great, if you're feeling that the world around you is sort of devolving into a little bit of chaos, this book can really help you to focus on that internal locus of control and start improving your situation from the inside out, and focusing and working with things that are absolutely within your control. And I believe that that is the way we will actually be able to move forward into our next series. So regardless of what's going on in the world, regardless of what's going on in politics, we can actually control how we feel on a daily basis and how we interact with others. So, focus on what you can control, and hopefully that gives you a little bit of optimism leading into the week.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Jordan Peterson. I love some of his recent podcast episodes. He's now partnered with, right, or he's using the platform of the Daily Wire. I think that that's a very natural migration for his content, and I look forward to continue seeing what else he produces. Jumping into the first story of the day that I want to cover with you guys, and this one's a big one in my opinion. I'm just going to run through some of the facts, and then we'll get into kind of our perspectives and opinions on it. This first article is from timcast.com. Really encourage you guys to check it out. An insider story exposing a U.S. election company's ties to China. Records show millions of pages of sensitive data stored on Chinese servers. Further on, essentially, Eugene Yu, the head of the software company Connect, allegedly compromised information on hundreds of county election employees and is set to be extradited from Lansing, Michigan to Los Angeles, California, according to the LA Times. Researchers say they discovered the server contained records of nearly 1.8 million U.S. election workers with all of their personal ID information, including names, phone numbers, addresses, and names of their family members. The server even contained their personal banking records. Investigators say the Connect server also had details on where election machines were physically located, as well as floor plans of the buildings used around the country in U.S. elections. Catherine Engelbrecht, co-founder of True the Vote, told Timcast when she presented this information from one of the research resources, Greg Phillips, head of company called OPSEC, which is contracted with True the Vote, said, "This is a national security threat. We've got to get this to the FBI." However, it turned out the FBI really wasn't interested in prosecuting this because they were too busy persecuting Donald Trump. That's me kind of adding an opinion piece there, obviously. But since 2021, True the Vote has been smeared as a conspiracy theory operation, with Engelbrecht admitting her organization has been made radioactive by the mainstream establishment. But following the discovery of the Connect server, she vowed to press on, saying sitting on the sidelines is not an option. In August, True the Vote organized an invitation-only event called The Pit, just outside Phoenix, Arizona, where journalists, election officials, law enforcement officials, and other interested stakeholders would converge. The all-day event, which was live-streamed, featured detailed presentations of how the server was found, along with screenshots of its content. Weeks after presentation at the Pit, Connect filed a lawsuit against Engelbrecht and Phillips, alleging the pair attacked you with racism and xenophobia following the revelations of the company's apparent ties to China. On October 3rd, the New York Times published an article refreshing the mainstream conspiracy theory narrative against the beleaguered True the Vote. The Times article featured a quote from an election board chair who said, "This is a completely fabricated issue," and used the word conspiracy on 10 separate occasions. Yet the very next day, corporate news outlets reported that Eugene Yu, founder and chief executive officer of Connect, had been taken into custody. The New York Times then reported that prosecutors said its investigations had found data stored in China. And so this is just wildly frustrating. Now, before getting into it, I want to make sure that everyone understands this isn't proof of election fraud or anything like that. Obviously, mainstream media and social media has told and taught us that 2020 was the fairest and freest elections of all time in the history of humanity. Like, we know that obviously is a fact. So I don't want YouTube to ban us for questioning the election, because we would never dare to question our overlords or the powers that be. But I really do find this frustrating. The New York Times has the hubris to one day claim one thing and then the next day completely come out and take a different position on it, and I don't feel like they accepted enough responsibility. The same way I don't feel like the Toronto Star accepted enough responsibility for that headline we covered earlier on in the show. And so I've got a few other links here, but I just encourage you guys to really spend some time to dive deep into this if it is of interest, because while it doesn't prove any sort of election fraud, it definitely could lead towards coercive aspects when it comes to an election, whether it's the previous election, the current midterm 2022 elections, or future elections. And if you're not allowed to store data on China, and then you come out and essentially say that anyone that claims you're storing data or you're storing data in China is xenophobic and being racist, and then it turns out you lied to us, well, that kind of grinds my gears. What are your thoughts on this, Adam?
Yeah, no, that definitely grinds my gears as well. And I would like to point the viewers over to a great documentary actually on HBO that's available called Kill Chain. So it's titled Kill Chain: The Cyber War on America's Elections. And man, let me tell you, it got me very much thinking about how elections could very easily be manipulated. And I think one of the best things for us to do is to ask, like, do we believe that there's 100% accuracy on the voting system? And it's like, well, probably not. And so it's like, okay,
I think
well,
you can obviously go further. It's obvious not, right? Like to think
yeah,
that it's 100% accurate, that there's no potential shenanigans. The biggest question, in my opinion, is whether the shenanigans add up to a material effect, right? So, like in accounting and finance, we've often got this concept of materiality, and then there's immaterial. So, something that's immaterial doesn't drastically change your interpretation of that information. Something that is material drastically changes, potentially at least, your interpretation of that information, or drives you to call into question these sort of things. And I think that's really where the devil's in the details, and this becomes a nuanced conversation. But at this point in time, we should all be able to, and hopefully YouTube and social media will someday accept that we should be able to be mature enough to explore these conversations.
have you seen Kill Chain?
No, I haven't. So I'll definitely write that down and check it out.
They were able to hack the current election machines that they're using in multiple states, especially Georgia. They were able to hack those machines with no internet connection in a room at a hackathon in under 30 minutes. A random hacker guy that was it just simply in the room. And he goes, yep, I'm in. And before like half the hackers had even gotten set up and started, he had already broken into the machine and started changing results. So very interesting documentary. And they point out a lot of reasons why it's probably not as difficult as you think to manipulate some of the results. So, I'll leave it at that.
Interesting. Yeah, I look forward to it. I feel like I've heard of it before, but I'll definitely have to spend some time and actually sit down and watch that documentary, and appreciate you sharing it. The next story here I want to share with you guys is from CBC News. And, inflation's kind of a thing. We were covering earlier on in the week how the government's finally admitted that it's not transitory. And now, because obviously inflation's beaten down the average consumer, the Canadian government, looking out for the average Canadian, is going to allow retailers and other businesses to pass on fees related to credit cards up to 2.4% to consumers. So this is actually a really interesting news story that I don't think you're going to see get a lot of play because it probably feels like a relative nothing burger. But I'm not going to put on my tinfoil hat here, but all I'm going to say is during the COVID lockdowns, we saw a lot of companies and businesses move towards non-cash transactions. Now we're going to see companies penalizing individuals that choose to pay by credit card. And I think TELUS announced that they're going to come out with a 2% charge for individuals that pay with a credit card. So it kind of feels like we're being funneled into only being able to use the banking system when it comes to paying for things. And obviously, the government would never step in and like lock people out of their bank accounts for just, protesting or daring to question the narrative, except for we saw that back in the trucker freedom convoy protest here in Canada. I find this concerning for a multitude of reasons, but one, it honestly kind of feels tone deaf at this moment in time with crazy inflation to see retailers about to pass on another 2% in charges to the average consumer. Because understand, they've been having to bear this cost for a significant period of time. So if they've already had to bear this cost for a significant period of time, that cost is actually already built in to the cost you're paying. So this is just going to be an excuse to increase the cost that the average consumer is paying if they dare to pay with a credit card. So I guess quick thoughts on this, Adam, and had you heard about this?
No, and that was my main concern, is that very obviously the retailer or merchant will have already priced in these fees. And I would say that it is next to a 0% probability they'll reduce the price of their cost of goods sold or whatever they're passing on to you. So we're going to have a price that's already included this 2.4%. We're then going to have nearly 8% inflation affecting us. So of course they'll raise the prices from their original prices. And then on top of that, you're going to be past this 2.4%. This looks to me like we're now going to pass 10% with inflation. And I don't think, like, I just cannot believe that nobody has thought this through. Like, if you and I are able to think this up in about 30 minutes of prep and we're like, hey, there's an obvious issue with this. This is already priced in. Now it just gets priced in plus. And I just,
because
like,
100% agree there, Adam. And the honest approach to this would be, and we're not going to see it, is technically prices should stay the exact same, and you should see a discount for cash and like bank debit card transactions here in Canada, or gift card transactions and things of that nature. But no, this is just going to prickle the average Canadian consumer. And honestly, I don't have the data in front of me, but I wouldn't be surprised to learn that this is actually going to more negatively impact the lower income individuals that maybe aren't able to constantly have a cash surplus where they can just, tap into that to pay directly for groceries or consumables or, fuel or, their housing costs and things of that nature. And instead, those of us that are kind of price insensitive, they're fine to be able to have a cash surplus in our day-to-day lives. Well, we can easily choose to change our behaviors, or we can just accept this additional fee that we're going to end up paying. This is interesting to me, to say the least, because I think anyone with a couple brain cells to rub together would come to the same conclusion that we're coming to right now. All right. Well, the next story I want to share with you guys, this is just a little tangent, because honestly, with inflation stuff, there are certain signals that make me think maybe we're going to see a pause in regards to inflation. However, stories like what the Wall Street Journal is reporting here, it makes me think that no, this is sticky prices that we've seen. This is a sticky sort of inflation, but this is actually shocking. So cost of shipping a container across the Pacific, September, and I was covering this, back then, $1,586, which was like a price we've never seen before. Beginning of this year was $13,706. Now it's $2,265. However, we've got companies like Costco saying and coming out that they're not ready to cut prices because of shipping or because of commodity costs falling. And again, in the Wall Street Journal, they explore a little bit further. They do have a pain in the ass paywall, so we won't be able to share those exact pieces of data for you guys. But I found this just fascinating to see this playing out. Any quick thoughts here on this one, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think there's a comment below there as well, something along the lines of like prices are very quick to rise and very slow to fall, and that just characterizes this whole situation, right? It's just, I don't see again like how we recover from this in any fast way. I think it's going to take a lot of time. I think a lot of money is going to be wasted. I think there's going to be a lot of inefficiency getting back to any type of demand that is sustainable. But yeah, I mean, it's just, this sucks.
Yeah. And talking about things sucking, this next story, maybe it's nothing, maybe it's something, but the US is buying $290 million worth of anti-radiation drugs for use in a nuclear emergency. Now, the government was very clear to come out and say that this is part of a long-standing ongoing effort to be better prepared to save lives following a radiological and nuclear emergencies. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services is purchasing a supply of the drug Nplate. That's kind of weird. There's no vowel in between N and P. Nplate from Amgen USA. Nplate is approved to treat blood cell injuries that accompany acute radiation syndrome in adults and pediatric patients. Further on, the U.S. government said the procurement of Nplate was not in response to the war in Ukraine. The Telegraph reported. An HSS spokesperson told the Telegraph this is part of an ongoing work for preparedness and radiological security. It has not been accelerated by the situation in Ukraine. So I'd like to take them at face value here, but I feel like there's a few things that they could have released if they really wanted to assure us that this has nothing to do with the Ukraine, right? They could show us how, they've been planning this for years if it's part of a long procurement plan. Secondly, they could show us that this fits in line with maybe their other procurements, right? If we're dropping $300 million a year getting these drugs or whatever, well, that's not going to trigger my spidey senses the way this kind of one-time bulk purchase kind of triggers my spidey senses. Any quick thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I read stuff like this and I go, "Oh yeah, that's probably nothing." Or maybe it's absolutely something. What are you talking about? A third of a freaking $1 billion gets spent on radiation pills? Like, are you kidding me? I don't know. It obviously doesn't mean that they're planning for anything. It obviously doesn't mean that they're, prepared to escalate things in the conflict in Europe right now, but it's also just miserable timing to do this. Like, you would have to know this headline was coming out and that it would cause unrest. I mean, it's definitely an unsettling headline at the very least.
And while certainly it's not proof that they're going to escalate the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, if you were to escalate the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, you probably would want to stock up on, anti-radiation drugs. So just interesting to say the least.
Well, on the plus side, Matt, nobody's blown up their pipelines yet. The pipelines coming from Russia into Germany that would allow this conflict to become de-escalated or even allow Europe to get its heat and gas back. Or, oh no, that did happen. They did blow up those pipelines.
Someone did. That is for sure. And again, like I won't go on a big conspiracy rabbit hole here, but it's interesting in that region, right? There was U.S. helicopters that normally aren't in the region. In that region, they'd been doing a military exercise a couple days beforehand. Just there definitely appears to be, if nothing else, a series of interesting coincidences. Again, the government tells us so little that it easily could have been that they were monitoring the Russians doing this or something like that. And because of security reasons, they won't share it with us. Who the hell knows? I'm almost positive we'll never 100% know, or it'll be 50 years from now, some information will get declassified. And then all of a sudden, we'll actually come to some sort of understanding, maybe like the Gulf of Tonkin, or like, I forget what it was called, but whatever got America into the Spanish War, right? The sinking of that ship. But anyways, we've got another set of stories here I want to cover. This is from True North. Liberal government confesses to $105 million World Economic Forum digital ID contract. Now, I am not a fan of digital ID for a multitude of reasons. One, I think that the burden of proof is so extreme on the government to have to justify any sort of switch or increase in the level of control that they've got over us. And I don't believe that they've met that burden of proof. Secondly, to choose to partner with the World Economic Forum in particular, when you obviously know that at least a large segment of your population has, if nothing else, a distrust of this organization, of these plutocrats, of these elites, also is very telling in my opinion. And I'm really glad that Dr. Leslyn Lewis is one of the few politicians regularly speaking out against the World Economic Forum in Canada. I think she's doing a great job. And it's really interesting when you dig into this. So the project is described as a WEF initiative to enable governments to access verifiable claims of a traveler's identity using a digital identity prototype. In response, Algebra, who's our transportation minister here in Canada, and actually just the other day, a Rebel News reporter was trying to interview him, and he just refused to talk to him because he said they're just misinformation. But Algebra's office was scant on details. The statement, "This information is not available," appeared 5 different times in the government's reply. It's actually pretty wild when you actually look at the different parts where they said, yeah, we're not going to, this information is not available. So it related to, who's involved, how many people are going to be applicable under this. And the budget 2021 proposal said the 105 million was going to be over a 5-year period starting in 2021 to 2022. And just to kind of build upon this, when we're thinking about everything related to the World Economic Forum and digital ID, it naturally makes me think of ArriveCan. So one, we're paying $105 million to the WEF for digital IDs. We've already dropped $50 million on the ArriveCan app, and a large amount of that went to one supplier. And I forget exactly, it starts with a GC something. But anyways, this one supplier, I think, has 5 employees, received tens of millions of dollars in funding, and then just use subcontractors in order to complete the work. But what I want to highlight specifically here from the National Post, only days after the ArriveCan app stopped being a mandatory requirement to enter Canada, witnesses barrage a parliamentary committee with testimony that it cost the economy billions while doing almost nothing to stop the spread of COVID-19. And now here's a direct quote. "We are pleased that we can now go back to focusing on the original intended purposes for ArriveCan, and that is to support the continued modernization of Canada's customs process." Trevor Bordeaux, government relations manager at Vancouver International Airport, told a Tuesday meeting of the Standing Committee at the International Trade, or on international trade. Fusing public health checks with the customs process has unfortunately shrouded the benefits that this technology can deliver, she said. ArriveCan can be part of the solution rather than the problem, but only if it's used correctly. Further on in the story, international spending is down 50 or 33% compared to 2019. And this is from the Tourism Industry Association of Canada. As a result, the Canadian tourism sector will likely pull in only about 80 billion for 2022 as compared to 105 billion earned in 2019. So literally, the ArriveCan app is believed to have cost us tens of billions of dollars in addition to the 50 million in tourism, in addition to the $50 million we actually shelled out for it. But what I really want to highlight here, well, right now, ArriveCan no longer is mandatory. It's still, we're trending in that direction, whether it be through the World Economic Forum and their digital ID, or whether it be through a revamped ArriveCan. And if you're not sure why you should question digital ID, or you're not sure why I'm so worked up about digital ID, think about this, right? Think about how ArriveCan was used to essentially force vaccine passports on individuals. Think about how the government froze individuals' bank accounts that disagreed with them and dared to protest in Ottawa earlier this year. Think about how we've already heard about things like ESG scores, right? How we've heard about social credit scores in China, and how our current prime minister has such a glowing review of the Chinese political system, as he's personally said in previous discussions and meetings. So this to me is just a variety of bad news bears, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I would like nobody to forget that's watching this that this is coming. This is a contract with the company that openly said, or the leader of this openly said, you will own nothing and be happy. And when people start saying things like that, I get really freaked out because I, in fact, enjoy owning things and I'm happy owning things. And I get really creeped out when I start hearing things like this. And I think another thing that this app, like, not necessarily just this app, but the idea of digital currency and digital ID that's controlled by a centralized power, it would be so easy to be corrupt under that system. How fast? We saw it and I was shocked. I was literally aghast that in Canada, the government could call up the big banks and force them to turn off people's bank accounts for having donated, very, very, very small sums to a organization that the government, by its own account, just deemed a terrorist organization, when I myself was at some of these demonstrations and was able to witness the fact that this was an extraordinarily peaceful organization that was driving down the highway to protest what arguably represented, over half the country of people that were saying, hey, this is enough. We've had it with this. And all of a sudden that was a terrorist organization when no weapons were found, right? Almost no crime was committed. And especially for how many people were actually organized in these events. For the government to be able to just call up the big banks and say, hey, these guys donated to this cause that we've deemed a terrorist organization, switch off their bank accounts. That to me is horrifying. And so that already has an additional step, right? That means they need to involve TD Bank. They need to involve Scotia, RBC, these big branches and big banks with lots of red tape. If they just have the switch, they don't even have to convince the banks to do that type of thing, and they can switch it off, or they can just remove your ability to operate a motor vehicle. Or maybe this applies as well to other health services. What if they can just turn off your OHIP, right? We're in Ontario, so we have the Ontario Health Insurance. What happens when that just is able to be toggled by a group that believes that they get to make these decisions on behalf of all Canadians without any input? I get genuinely terrified when I think about that. I think that's very scary, and that's why I put in our description today, this is very Orwellian to me. And maybe there's some debate as to whether it's Orwell or Huxley's version that's playing out right now. But I think the fact that I can debate that mentally with myself is in and of itself scary.
Yeah, and one last thing just on the bank accounts being frozen. It's not just the fact that they had the gall to do it, but it's also the lack of accountability where everyone kind of pointed to each other and they said, well, we never really gave a list. And it turns out, again, there's been no accountability to the hacker that actually leaked all the information of the donors to GiveSendGo, right? Like that just disappeared. The Canadian government won't condemn Iran's government, but they will condemn peaceful protesters here in Canada and attempt to freeze their bank accounts. Like, it's wild. It literally feels at times like we live in the upside down world. And I guess to try and, segue this into best day ever or a more positive light, the one thing I'll say is if you turn to the government to solve all your problems, you kind of deserve what the government's going to give you. And so I think it's just a constant reminder that we need to get involved in local politics. We need to be willing to speak out because courage begets courage, right? If you're willing to put yourself out there, if you're willing to risk potentially having your bank account frozen, that honestly is a symbol of courage that others will, group around, right? If it wasn't for the Freedom Trucker Convoy protesters, I honestly believe we'd be in a different position right now. One, we probably wouldn't have even had a change in the CPC leadership, right? We probably wouldn't have Pierre Poilievre. We would have continued to just have like a liberal light opposition party. We wouldn't have seen some of the dramatic issues that have came to light since the bank accounts being frozen and things like that, or Tamara Lich being in prison. And again, appreciate Al jumping in and sharing his thoughts and perspectives on all this, because again, even something as benign in a lot of people's opinion as sharing a comment, that begets courage, right? Like it helps show that we're not alone, that other people understand what's going on and they're not okay with it either. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important that daily we highlight some of these news stories. It's not to promote fear porn. It's not to get everyone worked up in the lather. It's simply to say, like, this is the trajectory we're headed on. And if we don't speak out, we almost kind of deserve what we end up getting. Not fully, because, like, honestly, the government should just screw off in 99% of the realms that it's involved with. But that's kind of my take. But let's quickly jump into some quick tips or updates. So I don't know if you've got a quick tip or update you want to share, Adam, but one that I'd like to share with people that we were discussing about earlier before we jumped on the show live is, falling asleep at night. So, I used to listen to white noise and things like that, and I won't get into a big story about why I decided white noise isn't good for me anymore. But I've recently stumbled upon a great fiction podcast called Clark's World. And it's a reference to Arthur C. Clarke, one of the most famous science fiction authors. And essentially, what this series of podcasts is, there's over like 800 episodes, is really high quality short fiction, science fiction stories that really well produced. Usually they're between like 20 minutes and 2 hours. You can kind of pick your length there. And I actually love falling asleep to it. So if anyone's looking for some, light fiction that you can fall asleep to, really encourage you to check out Clark's World.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think the tip I would like to share today is my passion of the use of a calendar for every single day. I use my calendar religiously, and I do believe that it allows me to fit everything into my schedule that I actually care about. And I think that a lot of people are unaware of the power of scheduling their days, and especially scheduling ahead of time, and building into your calendar the things that you truly do care about, right? So I'm gonna build in my meals. I'm gonna build in my physical fitness. I'm gonna build in my time with the dog. I'm gonna build in my time with my girlfriend or family or friends, and all of those things are important. And I find you can just slip up on time. Time can just pass you by really fast if you're not paying attention. And if you don't take the time to schedule these things in, a lot of things can get forgotten or left behind. And part of living the best day ever is bringing your friends and family and the people you care about in your life along with you. So I think that's one tip you could use to get 1% better every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important for people to understand you are your most valuable asset, right? So you want to maximize the productivity of yourself. And the best way to do that is by planning, is by being prepared, right? And calendar is the best way. I know sometimes it can be intimidating for individuals to want to embrace living out of your calendar. However, you can do this, step by step, right? Just start planning a couple things per day. Maybe there's certain things that you want to build in as routine. Well, again, getting that phone notification or seeing it pop up in your daily calendar is a great way to start to implement it, right? It's just these small baby steps can really compound over time. Um, Now, quick reminder, guys, we are posting articles every weekday on Substack. Really encourage you guys jump over if you want to get deeper into our show notes. We've also got a Telegram group where we'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinions, your hot takes on all the stories we're discussing. And in the second half of the show, Adam, do you want to kind of break down for people what they can expect?
Yeah, absolutely. So in today's show, we're going to discuss our personal experiences with dogs, bringing home new puppies, where to begin your training, getting the potential out of your dog's breed, and 7 of the best starting commands. So it's going to be all about puppies. So Thursdays are actually our day for random interests and hobbies. And while that does sound kind of funny that we're talking about puppies after using your calendar and using your SMART goals, and, culture jamming some thick topics, I think it's also important that we focus on our hobbies and are able to share some of our takeaways with you guys. There's some really fascinating things about dogs and some fascinating stats we're going to go over. And I really just wanted to share my experience because I am a new dog owner. And I think that some of the takeaways from this talk are actually going to be able to help you guys at home to be able to better control how your lifestyle plays out. If you have a dog, which it's statistically likely that you do, by the way, then these tips and tricks are going to help you to optimize your time with your dog as well as fit it into your lifestyle. So you don't have to make big sacrifices in order to love that little furry friend of yours.
Yeah, I look forward to it. I've never tried to train a dog. We had like farm dogs growing up, but we'll get more into that in the second half of the show. But I guess one last point I'll leave with people is if you can't train a dog, what makes you think you can harness your full potential or you can train yourself?
Hey, that's a really great point that I hadn't included in this presentation. So looking forward to it, guys, and we'll see you back here in a couple of minutes. That was the Last 24 show. See ya.
They say life is what you make it. So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day. No matter what the weather say, life is like a record, so just let it play. Educate, motivate, entertain and demonstrate. Health, wealth, relationships and legacy we elevate. Every day is what you make it, so don't take it and waste it. Never too late to save it. Remember, roses grow from pavement. Let me break this down in layman's. Just wanna live outrageous. Build my way to greatness. Gotta speak my truth and face it. Hear the basis lies. Gotta challenge it and break it. Take a shot of truth. Chase it with some motivation. The best day ever. The best day ever. We gon' squad up. Have the best day together. Best day ever. Best day ever. We gon' squad up. Go harder than any weather. What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day. No matter what the weather say, life is like a record, so just let it play. Best Day Ever Media. Song by Dan the Lost Boy.
Alrighty, everybody. Welcome back to our show here. This is Best Day Ever episode number 4. So we are cranking through these every single day. We're going to be here with you, or I should say every weekday. And today is our Thursday show. So on Thursdays, we're going to be talking about random hobbies and interests that Matt and I have. And so that could bring us along a really wide breadth of topics. And today we're actually going to be talking about training for dogs. So I am a recent pet owner. I have a brand new dog. She's a German short hair pointer, and her name is Mayday. I always get a lot of positive feedback when I tell people my dog's name. I thought it was super creative, and it was actually inspired by a James Bond girl. So Mayday is my brand new dog. And in the process of bringing this dog home, there was a lot of research that I did, and I had to First of all, it makes a big decisions about what breed would be appropriate for me, how I was going to integrate the dog into our home life, including like, where's the dog going to sleep? Do we need to do some crate training for the dog? Is there certain things in our household that might be poisonous or hurt or harm our dog? And what's lifestyle going to be like after you get a dog? I mean, they're pretty high maintenance animals. They need to be walked consistently. They need to be fed, watered, all those things. And so I sought out a bunch of research, and on today's show, I'm going to really try and talk to you guys about, where to get started, how to get the potential out of your dog's breed, and the 7 best starting commands that I think are most effective to having a dog that you can actually bring out in public, a dog that you can walk and be in the neighborhood with, that isn't going to cause you a bunch of trouble or cause you to be embarrassed or afraid even. And then finally, we're going to talk about how to integrate your happy dog into your full schedule. So welcome to the show, Matt. I would like to ask you a few questions about your experience with dogs. So would you mind getting started by telling us your experience? Did you ever have a dog?
Sure. Yeah. So I've had growing up, we had 2 dogs at 2 different points in time. So I think before I was born, or right around when I was born, we got just like a farm dog, which was like a lab mutt mix, and he was definitely untrained, and eventually ran away, got off chain, and just disappeared. And or at least that was the story I was told. I don't know. I was really young. Maybe maybe he went out behind the barn, but. And then secondly, when I was a little bit older, probably halfway through grade school, we got a miniature schnauzer, and that was kind of like a house dog. And he was a solid dog, but again, not like super well trained.
Awesome. I'm trying to recollect right now what a miniature schnauzer would actually look like.
Like,
Does it remind you of Peter's dog, but like much smaller?
yeah, well, like I believe that Murphy's like a giant schnauzer or whatever you call that, but like this one was like salt and pepper, and I don't know what weight he'd be, but he was like maybe about like his back would be like that high off the ground or whatever.
Okay. Interesting. What
Really
was that?
yippy yappy.
What was that schnauzer's name?
Prince, my mom.
Prince. Oh,
Yeah.
naturally. Of course it was Prince, like the musician, or big royal family fans.
I honestly don't know the history behind it. She just named it Prince, and he was Prince ever since.
Okay. Okay. Do you have any specific stories or events that you remember about Prince, or was he just kind of around the house?
Yeah, like he was a solid dog. I guess like I see in your show notes here, one of the questions is the funniest thing you remember about your dog doing. So I do remember one, like at the time, it was not funny. It is funny now looking back on it, but like it was not funny whatsoever to me. I think it was probably the first or second time ever in high school that I'd had a girl over to my house, and like my girlfriend at the time. Essentially, without getting into a lot of details, like we were just kind of sitting out, hanging on my bed, and all of a sudden, like my bedroom was upstairs in an old farmhouse, and the dog just came ripping upstairs and jumped on the bed, lifted his leg, and just pissed on like her in the covers. And I was just like, I just lost it. Like, and again, I like when I say I lost it, I didn't like yell or hit the dog or anything like that, but I was just like so embarrassed, so like confused by the entire situation. Like it just caught me so off guard. It was, of all the possibilities, I was in an alien showing up would have been like ranked equally in my opinion versus that experience.
So I'm guessing the open door policy at home was a no-fly zone after that. I mean,
Well,
that's definitely shocking.
this is probably a whole different subject matter, but like old farmhouse, so there's no door on the
Oh.
bedrooms. That's it would just rip in, and that's why I didn't have a girl in my bedroom.
Okay, I was imagining the old lead painted doors that have that really small circular handle on them that don't
Mhm.
actually ever lock, but and honestly they don't close either
Yeah,
because the house is
we
settled.
definitely have those, and like, but like it was yeah. Anyways, we've got a couple of those in the house. My parents still live there, and like literally, like it's probably like that thick, the different layers of paint on it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you get a quarter inch out of that paint for sure. Okay, did you have any other dogs in your life, like friends, family members, neighbors that stand out?
Like there's always dogs on farms and stuff like that. So yeah, just about everyone had some sort of like dog, usually outdoors, right? And nothing that really like stands out to me though. But like I don't think up until like become like university and post university, I never met like a well-trained dog.
Okay. Yeah. To be fair, I also don't recall ever meeting a well-trained dog to either in my childhood, except for one. And this dog's name was Harley. Okay. And he was a German Shepherd, beautiful dog. But he was all black. He didn't have that like multicolored, like brown and black. He was all black German Shepherd. And this dog, I'll let you make some character assessments of his owner, but this dog would recover beer for you from the fridge. So if you were on the couch, you could ask this dog to go and get a beer, and it absolutely would do it every single time. MGD, I remember it in the bottle, and the dog would open the fridge, grab the MGD, close the fridge, bring it to the owner, and then he would obviously proceed to drink that beer. This, as you can imagine, went on a lot. And so this dog, Harley, could recover beer from the fridge, and he would also he would obsessively stay. So like if you told this dog to stay, it would stay until it was told not to stay. And so it was an incredibly obedient dog. And like some of the things, I don't know if this is right or wrong. I'm just going to tell you what happened. But like, the owner would put like a snack or like a treat or something on his snout, and he would say, stay. And the dog would literally just stay fixed, locked in position indefinitely. And so you could leave the room, you could go do whatever you wanted, and the dog would still be there waiting to be told, okay, it's good to go now to have the treat. So I think that stuck out to me. I mean, the idea of the dog retrieving beer from the fridge or from a cooler or anything like that, that was like insane to me. I wouldn't have believed it if I didn't see it myself. And obviously I participated in the sport. So it was an interesting thing to grow up with. And this was around the time I was in high school, I was seeing this stuff. So that one definitely stuck out to me. Other than that, like, generally speaking, I grew up as well on a farm a lot. And of course there were dogs that were just sort of roaming around, and I don't know if they ever knew how many dogs they had or whether or not the dogs were coming or going. They always just sort of fed themselves. And so, for me, getting a dog was a very interesting experience because I wanted to do something totally different. I wanted to go much more down the obedience training route and have a dog that I could use as a working dog. So that certainly is a different approach. I have a question here for you. What is your favorite fictional dog?
Yeah, and I saw you actually put a huge list in the Substack article. And honestly, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little hurt that my two favorite fictional, well, they're not even fictional. One was fictional, one's a real dog. Neither of them are in this list. So first
No
of all,
way.
I'd have to say London is my favorite dog, probably. And this is a real dog, right? From The Littlest Hobo. You know,
Okay.
you know The Littlest Hobo,
I
right?
know the title. I haven't read it.
Oh my god, no, it's a TV show.
I haven't seen it
And
then.
it was shot in, like, I think London, Ontario, right? And the dog was named London, and, like, "Maybe tomorrow I'll wanna settle down." And, like, oh, man, you have to go, like, watch. It's, like, Canadiana to the extreme, but anyways, it was this, like, serialized, I think it was a half-hour TV show with a live dog where, like, there'd be a bad guy and the dog would always foil the bad guy, and all the other humans are kind of, like, stupid or oblivious, and, like, I remember it being high quality video productions, but now that I'm talking out loud, there's no way it was. But like there was one where the dog's carrying like a gun in like by the strap in his mouth. Yeah, London.
Man,
So
this looks so awesome. I can't believe I
it
missed out on
it was
this.
like late 80s is when I think it was produced, but like again, Canadian TV, you have to have a certain amount of like Canadian content. So they would regularly play replays in the early 90s, I think on CTV News or whatever CTV the TV station used to be called, because it used to be something else.
Unreal. Well, okay, I certainly was not aware of London. What's the other
And then
dog you're referencing?
Rin Tin Tin, who I thought was probably one of the most famous dogs of all time.
Whoa, hold on. Isn't Tintin on my list? I think
I didn't see Rin Tin Tin.
Oh my goodness, I forgot to include Tintin. I'm so sorry.
And because I loved like reading the book, but I want to make sure we're not talking about like Tintin, the uh French comic, right? We're talking about Rin Tin Tin, the American dog that
No, I'm talking about the French one.
yeah.
We're
So yeah.
Wow, we are on two different pages about dogs here. I'm so sorry. And if you guys are listening along to this, I've included a really fun list of fictional dogs that you may or may not have forgotten about. Some of them are more obvious than others, but I'd like to take you through a little bit of a journey down perhaps what could be memory lane here. So a few fictional dogs I was able to think of, despite forgetting Rin Tin Tin in London. Um, it was Snoopy, okay, from Peanuts. And I included an image here of Snoopy in my show notes because, of course, Snoopy is one of my very favorite characters ever. I've got this image here of Snoopy sleeping on his belly, and he's got some Zeds floating up because he's peacefully asleep. And in fact, this is something I'm going to have tattooed, by the way, a little sneak peek. I'm going to put that on my finger because I absolutely freaking love Snoopy. If I could, I would move the webcam, but you know how positioning these things works. It'll take me 4 hours to get it back. I actually have beside me here a poster of an Omega Speedmaster Professional that is a sort of tribute to the Apollo missions where allegedly the U.S. went to the moon and landed with the Apollo 11. So Snoopy is a big part of that. He was the Silver Snoopy Award. Anyways, there's a whole watch thing. I'll probably unpack that in a separate video for you guys as a random hobby of mine. But Snoopy, big all-time favorite for me. Second on my list here is Scooby-Doo. Okay, who doesn't have good memories of Scooby-Doo? Matt, was Scooby-Doo before your time? And I don't mean to be such an ageist here.
The original Scooby-Doo, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There might have been like a revamped version, but like we grew up with like 4 to 6 TV channels, right, from the aerials. So we definitely never got Scooby-Doo.
Okay, so I happened to get Scooby-Doo, and I loved Scooby-Doo because it was on every morning, I think around 7 or something. So it was perfectly timed. We were solving mysteries every day before school at the farmhouse, and then I would kind of limp my way up that freaking mile-long driveway through the snow, uphill both ways in order to catch the bus there. So, okay, so we got Scooby-Doo. We've also got Clifford the Big Red Dog. Not a huge Clifford fan, but it is an excellent character.
As a little kid, like that book slapped. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. We got Toto, okay, Wizard of Oz. If you don't know Toto, you've got issues. You might be with the Wicked Witch of the West there. We've got Rex, and you guys may have forgotten Rex, but Rex was a dog in The Dogs of War by Tchaikovsky. Okay, so that's looking back a little bit more heavy on the lit. We've also got White Fang. Did you ever read Jack London?
Yeah, like the name hits, and I'd have to like honestly like refresh my memory, but definitely I've heard of the name.
Okay, excellent. So for those of you at home, Google that. White Fang, excellent character, bit of a wolf. We've got Argos, okay, from the Odyssey by Homer, which I've not gotten around to reading, but I've read excerpts and read lots of summaries. Excellent content there. We've got Snowy from Tintin, the one I'm thinking about, so not what Matt's talking about.
Well, speaking of Snowy, I noticed this one's not on your list, and maybe it doesn't count because it was a what did they call them? A werewolf or whatever from Snow from Game of Thrones, the big white wolf. Yeah.
Oh, Jesus, I've forgotten the biggest cultural phenom of the last decade. Oh, man, my list is being put to shame. Drop it in the comments, guys, if you're thinking of other dogs that I just completely forgot about. Please engage in this conversation. And that reminds me, speaking of dogs that were forgotten, is the oft-forgotten Odie. Odie from Garfield. You guys forgot about Odie. Garfield stole the spotlight, but Odie was always there, and you guys completely forgot about him. We've got Pluto from Mickey Mouse. Absolutely timeless character. We've also got another forgotten dog, one that I guarantee you guys forgot about, unless you were subscribed to our Substack, wink, wink, and that's Slink. Slink from Toy Story. Come on. Slink was a huge character and helped out Woody on several occasions to accomplish the mission. So you absolutely forgot that. We would be completely out of left field. I mean, we would be out to lunch if we forgot to mention the Lady and the Tramp. Are you kidding me?
And so speaking of Lady and the Tramp, like definitely watched that a lot when we were growing up. But secondly, do you remember Turner and Hooch?
No.
Oh man, you actually like need to go back and watch this. It would have been like late 80s, early 90s, I think. It had Tom Hanks when he was just starting to like blow up. I think it was right after probably Big or something like that. But it was this guy gets a junkyard dog, essentially, like he inherits it. and the junkyard dog's full of attitude. He drinks beer. He could open a beer. And it was honestly, until we started talking here, I forgot. But like, I've watched this movie an absurd amount of times.
Oh man, Tom Hanks looking like a stud in
I
that
bet this movie
old
holds.
suit.
I'm just going to throw it out there. I think this one would hold up.
Okay, well, I'm going to give it a shot at some point. That sounds great. And he sounds a little bit like Harley. Maybe they were friends, cranking beers there in the back alley. Speaking of cranking beers in the back alley, we've got Tito. Tito, the little chihuahua from Oliver and Company. One of the greatest movies of all time, by the way. Matt, are you familiar with Oliver and Company?
I'd have to Google it. Like, is that
Oh,
a Disney
oh,
movie or no?
stop the show. Yeah, I think it is probably a Disney production. Yeah, it's Disney. But oh man, if you don't know this show, you are in deep, deep,
No.
deep, deep
Although
water.
this is making me thinking of Homeward Bound. Do you remember that one?
Yep,
Like
excellent
the two
show
dogs. I
or
forget what their
movie
names
rather.
were, but like, yeah, we watched that movie a lot.
Oh man, you don't even know. This has got lots of musical
Oh,
components,
actually,
being that it's
that
Disney.
video, yeah. I don't think I've seen it many times, but I've seen it once or twice. That cover helps seeing the main dog.
Yeah, I mean, this movie is an absolute slapper, you guys. You wouldn't even believe how good that movie is. And then finally, I thought we should pay our respects, last but not least, Old Yeller. Okay.
Yeah,
If you didn't cry watching Old Yeller, you're a
right.
psychopath. And I cry every time. I don't care if you put that on right now, I'll start crying. I thought that'd be a fun little segment to kind of get us started, walk us all down memory lane. But I have just a couple more questions here. Dogs versus cats, Matt, if you had to pick.
I always think of the Winston Churchill quote.
Okay.
Um, Dogs look up to us, cats look down on us, pigs treat us like equals.
Wow. Wow. That is absolutely profound, Matt. And so, wait, are cats liberals? Is that what you're saying?
No, just like a cat is truly indifferent to your existence, or at least most
Uh,
cats are, right? So
yeah,
like they look
liberals.
down on you because there's like, I'm better than you. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I'd like, yeah, I'd lean slightly towards dogs, but again, both have their place, right? Like barn cats are awesome.
I like barn
Indoor
cats.
cats. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, I'm bringing a cat to the Citadel. Favorite breed of dog? Do you have a favorite breed?
No.
Oh my God, this guy, I don't know who invited him, but he doesn't have a favorite breed. Well, I'm going to go ahead and just tell you my favorite breed, and it's the German short hair pointer. Naturally, that's what I ended up choosing. And the reason I got that is it's a myriad of reasons, but I'm using this dog as a working dog. Okay. So we're going to be actually hunting with our dog and training it to retrieve as well as point out game for us. So dogs can almost do everything. I have a few questions, Matt, that I would like to give you that are a little more they're different. They're definitely of a different spirit. So I would love to hear as well from anybody in the Telegram chat, or if you're commenting here on YouTube, or if you're a subscriber to our Substack. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. And of course, I do have a link with some of the answers. Matt, do not click that link. And tell me right now, have you clicked the link?
No.
Okay,
I
good job.
didn't prep, so
Okay, Matt came unprepared, and that's good because that's going to add some value to you guys, and I'd love to hear your comments as well. Matt, what do you think the value of the pet industry is?
like it would definitely be in the billions. I'd have no idea, but I'd imagine there could even be like an individual pet company that at least at one point in time would have had $1 billion valuation. So yeah, I
Okay.
would say billions and billions for sure. Again, if
Okay,
we're talking
give us one
worldwide,
number.
I
Yeah.
don't even know the consequences. I'd probably guess like 20, 30 billion.
Okay. Okay, so 20, 30 billion. That's what Matt's got. What do you guys have? Okay, Matt, how much would you be willing to budget for your pet's food, assuming you had a pet?
Like I just wouldn't find myself in that situation. But if I were to, like, whatever it costs to feed them is what I would feed them. Like I
How much
honestly don't know.
roughly do you think you spend on yourself per month or per year on food? Do you have an idea?
Um, I really wouldn't be able to accurately estimate it, but if I had to, I'd probably like $4,000 maybe.
Okay, interesting. And then some of these questions are just because it's going to come up later. But would you ever get your pet a Christmas present?
Yeah, like we did all the time growing up, right? With the dog, and like he'd have his own little stocking and shit like that. Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, his name is Prince. You would have had to
Hmm.
get him a stocking. And if you had to guess, how many American households, as a percentage, do you think would own at least one pet?
Yeah, one thing about this question, I'd actually be curious to know like how this has evolved over time, like whether we've got more or less dogs today than like 50 years ago. I think you kind of hinted that it was high earlier on in the show, so had I been like just point blank, I probably would have guessed below 50%, but because you kind of led the witness on that, I'm going to guess slightly above 50%.
Yeah, this may come across as shocking to you, but it's 67%. 67% of American households, that's two-thirds, own at least one pet.
And then
And
I think the big question is how many of them should own.
absolutely. We are not going to be commenting on that today because it's going to be almost, probably a third of that. So
Hmm.
two-thirds of America has at least one pet. Now, Matt, you said that you thought the US pet industry or the world pet industry may be around $30 billion.
Well, I
Well,
said like I had no idea, but yeah, billions
okay.
for
Well,
sure.
you still have no idea because what we know is that in 2020, the US pet industry alone, US alone, reached $99 billion.
Well, I mean,
It
though,
does say estimated.
it might have got a COVID bump there. I think a lot of people got pets while they were in lockdown.
So, approximately 21% of pet owners spent more money during the COVID-19 pandemic. And about 12% of adults with kids under 18 adopted pets due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So, how about that? That's really interesting. 12% of adults with kids under 18 adopted pets due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I think that, Matt, may have something to do with the question you originally posed, which is how many of these people should own pets. Well, if you're getting pets as a response to not being able to travel or not being able to, see your friends and family or anything like that for the last couple of years, does that really mean that you've actually thought about the, lifetime of a pet? Pets, dogs, especially. I mean, these things are going to live 10 to 15 years, right? So that I think right there is a little bit shocking, but I'd like to just quickly read through some more of these stats here that is provided by petpedia.co. So we've got dog owners spending about $73 a year on grooming. Doesn't seem like a huge outlay. We've got 31% of pet industry customers being millennials. That's kind of interesting because I would think, and this kind of goes back to your question, Matt, about who should be owning these pets. And it is a little bit interesting to think that millennials are owning or at least spending about 31% in the pet industry. And that's just kind of interesting because like these guys should be out building, they should be out working, they should be out.
Yeah. I kind of feel like this is a soft generation, right? Like it's the generation of pet moms and pet dads and
Okay.
or like animal moms or whatever. So that actually checks out. That passes the sniff test. The one that actually jumps out to me is shocking. And I'll make a prediction here as well. I guess maybe cats are cheaper, but like I'm shocked if you were to tell me that dog owners spend $300 a year on pet food because
That's a lie.
I would have guessed it was higher, and I would personally guess you're spending over $1,000.
Oh my God. So every bag of food that I buy for Mayday is 89 dollars, I believe. And she eats it in, I don't know, record time, whatever that is, like probably 3 weeks or so. So whatever that math kind of
So yeah, you're
checks out
probably
to
like
be.
just over $1,000 then, right?
Yeah. So if I'm looking at 89, right, and it's every 3 weeks, so basically just times 52 for simple math.
No, times 12, right? If she's
Times
eating like
12.
one bag a
Oh
month.
my God. 89 times 12. I'm an idiot. That's weekly. Yeah. So just over $1,000,
Yeah.
$1,068. So roughly three times that. Now, a lot of people do have smaller dogs, right? They may have like these chihuahuas or
But
shih
I think
tzus or
those people
something.
sometimes get like the canned food and shit too, so that probably
Oh no.
balances out.
Well, and that's where I think this stat here about 43% of dog owners and cat owners buying premium pet food. And so, premium pet food, I mean, we're not talking about cheap stuff here. We're talking about things that are actually allegedly made with just meat and meat proteins that are actually coming from chicken or beef or
Eh,
fish,
don't
which are
jump to
the
conclusions. There's
basics.
vegan pets now.
Oh, come on, Matt. We're not allowed to talk about that on here. We'll get canceled. So you were saying that, yes, you would get Prince a Christmas gift. or a treat, and over 50% of
I would have thought way
cat owners.
higher.
Yeah, me too. I
I
actually
would have
think
said like 90.
these stats are skewed. And by the way, as we're sharing these, it's interesting to note that there's lies, there's damn lies, and then there's statistics. So all of this could just be framed however they want it to be framed, whoever's producing these stats. But I mean, I think it's safe to say, Matt, with an industry that's $99 billion in the US alone, approximately, right? So it could be more. And of course, that was 2020. So now that those dogs are a little bit older, that's what they were spending on puppies. I mean, now they've got to spend all this accumulated growth. They have to spend now on adult dogs, which are actually quite a bit more expensive when it comes to the food and the toys and the things that they consume. So, you know, are those stats surprising to you? Is this kind of what you were expecting about the industry? You were generally aware that it was a absolutely like massive industry?
Yeah, for sure. Because even thinking back to like what was one of the biggest .com business cases, right? And that was pets.com.
Pets.com.
And people thought like, oh man, if you could get pets owners on a subscription when it comes to the food, right? Like that was just a license to print money. So yeah.
Yeah, and I also expected the industry to be large, but I actually was shocked when I read that the U.S. industry alone was $99 billion in 2020. I mean, that is to me like a ridiculously large number. So a little bit shocked, but then I see my own spending, and our dog goes through and eats, you know, a new toy. She'll eat it in 2 or 3 days, and then you got to buy her something else. And it's a whole thing, but that keeps them from chewing on your shoes and everything else. So it definitely is a whole thing. And that's kind of where I wanted to start the conversation with you guys today, and sort of read through with you my presentation here. And the spirit of this presentation is about the difference between, you know, what is the onus that you can place on the dog and what is within your control to affect. And I'm of the perspective or mindset that in fact a lot of this stuff is under your control, and I think it's best to view it that way, even if you do have a dog that perhaps has you know, a bit of an off temperament or doesn't obey you as much as you would like to. There's things that we can do, there's strategies we can employ, and there's certainly training techniques we can use to get your dog obeying you more often and having better behavior throughout the day. And as you're walking it in public or bringing it around your younger family. I know one of the scariest things that ever happened to me while I was growing up was my little sister, who's I believe 11 years younger than me. We were visiting some family in New Brunswick, and their dog, I think it was a little Shih Tzu, jumped up, lunged up at her, and she was being a bit of a terrorist, but it lunged up and like bit her face. And then she fell onto a tile floor. And whether or not the dog really bit her face or whether she just split her lip on the floor, regardless of what really happened, it was all very fast. She ended up getting stitches on her face, and today she still has a scar from this. So, you know, that's scary, right? And when you've got that level of emotion in the room, you know, it was a family gathering, lots of people there, blood, screaming, the dog's freaking out, everybody's panicking. What happened? Oh my God, it bit her. It was this whole thing that was really quite scary. And I think that training and the use of these skills and commands that you can give your dog to increase their obedience is going to be something that you use for a lifetime of owning the dog, as well as something that they're going to carry through in all of their interactions. Okay. So if your dog learns to be more obedient with you, it's more likely, I believe, that they're going to be more obedient during all of their social interactions. And I think it's really important to view it through that lens. So I guess the best place to start with this stuff is first the understanding that it's not your dog, it's you. And one of the things I wanted to kind of highlight in order to convey that point is that dogs have coexisted with humans for a long time. Okay. We've been training dogs for a very long time. We've been teaching them a lot of skills and using them for a multitude of purposes. And so I'm sure we can think of some of the various services that dogs perform and do for us. But first, I'd like to ask Matt, Matt, are there any service dogs you can think of off the top of your head without cheating on my show notes? So
what do you mean?
I'll
Oh,
give you
like
an
types of
example.
service dogs?
Yeah, so like one
Oh,
service
sure,
that
like
we use
blind
dogs for.
people, right? Like,
Yep,
and now we've got the soft generation, right? So whatever they called, like those comfort dogs that you see on airplanes and stuff
those
like
are
that.
called therapy dogs.
Therapy dogs, comfort dogs. And like I don't know if this counts as like service animals, but like obviously there's police dogs, there's bomb sniffing dogs. What else would there be when it comes to dogs? Uh, like I guess like hunting dogs, like yours, right? If you count that as service, and then dogs that get beer from the fridge.
Excellent. One of the most important ones is the one you landed on. So I appreciate that. But some of the dogs that you may not have actually thought about are mobility assistance dogs. Okay. Have you ever heard of a mobility assistance dog?
Like, would that be a dog for someone in a wheelchair?
It could be somebody in a wheelchair, so that could certainly be an application. But one popular application that's been going on for a little while now is, of course, if you and excuse me, I'm going to get a little tongue in cheek here, but
If you tell me people are riding dogs for mobility, that's going to blow my mind.
no, but I'm going to get tongue in cheek here because this is getting a little bit strange. It turns out if you run a 20-year war overseas, and the basis of how your enemy is fighting you back is with IEDs, people are going to lose some legs. People are going to lose some mobility. So what we've actually trained some dogs to help with now is called mobility assistance. And what you can actually have certain breeds of dog do is called the brace command. Okay, and the brace command, the dog stiffens up. Okay, it stiffens all of its muscles up, and it really like kind of it leans back. It sort of does a deadlift for you, so that the owner, if they're if they've got some issue with their mobility, they've lost a leg, maybe they're walking on a prosthetic, or maybe they can't. Stairs are an issue for them. They can actually use the dog as a bit of a crutch in certain circumstances. So this is an interesting application that honestly I had not really thought about and was a little bit surprised to hear about. Another type of dog that we use for a service dog is called a seizure and medical assistance dog. And these dogs will actually bring alert. They'll bring an alert to medical attention for you. So really interesting application of a service dog that I wasn't really thinking about. I'm fortunate enough to not have any of that in my family. So definitely interesting to hear. There's also hearing dogs. Okay, so for people with hearing impairments, these dogs will alert the owner if something's going on, like a door knock or a fire alarm. Okay, fire code now in Canada, at least where we live, has these light and siren sort of smoke detectors. But certainly that's not popular, I don't think, across the country or across North America at
it's
this
code
point.
now, but it's retroactive. Like it's not retroactive. Yeah.
Exactly. So I would argue that most houses more than likely don't have a light and sound smoke detector. So this is a great application for a service dog. Now, you brought up police dogs and military dogs and bomb sniffing dogs that we call actually detection dogs. And police dogs are interesting because they can track people. They can defend the police officer. They can make an offensive play where by entering rooms or clearing buildings, which is actually a really dangerous task for a police officer. Same with military dogs. They can be used for tracking. They can be used for um, some interesting applications. And one thing that I wanted to bring up, Matt, that I assume you probably haven't ever heard of, but is the use of dogs in World War II to plant bombs. Did you hear about this ever, Matt?
I feel like I've maybe like seen like one of those like weird little historical fact things. Yeah. Although like plant bombs or carry bombs.
So they were carrying bombs, but the purpose of the training exercise, and this was, an attempt by the Soviet Union to perhaps avoid some, loss of human life. And so, of course, this is an interesting conversation. Maybe it's just, what is the hierarchy of life? Is one life actually more important or bit more valuable than another? I don't know. But the Soviets saw that it would probably be better if they sent the dogs in to plant bombs and drop bombs on tanks. So
But
what they
like
would
the
do.
dog dies, right? Or no?
No. The idea of this was that the idea behind this was that the dog would actually carry the bomb to a tank, leave the bomb at the tank, and then it would blow up when the dog retreats. The idea behind that is these are tracked vehicles. Okay. So if you want to stop a tank, generally speaking, you need to blow up the tracks would be a great way to immobilize it. And they're very difficult to fix, especially in a war zone. Your engineers aren't kind of scuttling around fixing tracks in the middle of a gunfight. So what would happen is the dog was supposed to drop the bomb beside the tracks, run back, okay, so that they don't have to train these dogs every time they want to drop a bomb, train a new dog, and blow up the tracks. Mixed results here, obviously. One of the issues the dogs had was actually having multiple targets. It wasn't very clear to the dog, I guess, that, one tank was the same as another tank. And so like they could have, go and do this and repeat this many times. And in some examples, in some cases, they actually ended up bringing the bomb back to the trainer. And that's obviously bad because, bombs go boom. And if you're the trainer, you don't want it going boom with you. So that's a program that got canceled fairly quick. But there are many examples of dogs being used in warfare, and particularly in recent times. We've been seeing dogs like the Belgian Malamute being used in Afghanistan for all sorts of purposes. And one named Cairo was actually present during Operation Neptune Spear, which is the operation in which Osama bin Laden was killed. So very interesting exploration there of what we use for dogs. Another couple of dog service dogs that I actually hadn't really thought about, but are really prevalent, are search and rescue dogs. And this makes sense to me because search and rescue dogs, obviously they've got unbelievably acute hearing. They're really great at hearing, and their noses are so incredible. They can smell humans. They can smell people well below snow. They can smell people that are lost in the forest that have gotten off trail. These dogs are amazing. And so they've trained these dogs very well to be able to detect humans and find them. And I think that that's very fascinating. Lots of applications there, especially in alpine regions. And then there's also herding dogs, perhaps one of the oldest skills that we've learned to teach dogs and breed into their DNA is for certain dogs like, an Australian Shepherd or something like that, to be able to herd dogs. And if you've never seen dogs herding before, I really, really, really can't stress enough that it is unbelievable. Trainers typically communicate with those dogs through a series of different whistles. Okay, so different tones or different pitches of whistle will instruct the dog to do a different type of herd. So you can essentially whistle using your mouth at a higher or lower pitch to tell the dog where you would like the sheep or whatever sort of grazing animal you're trying to get herded into its specific pens. So really interesting application there. And then, of course, the final application, which is what I'm most interested in, is hunting. So I bought my dog a German Shorthair Pointer because she's a pointing dog. She's also a retriever, which means she has webbed feet. She can swim incredibly well. She can retrieve birds, whether that's waterfowl or upland fowl. And you can shoot over the dog, so the dog remains steady when it's pointing. I have an excellent video. I wish I was smart enough to upload it from my run this morning. My dog this morning made a perfect steady point at a deer right beside the trail and remained steady until I told her to go. And that is absolutely what we're going for when we're training these dogs for hunting, because you don't want to have an accident. And so that steady angle is really important. So, that's kind of an exploration of some of the various dogs that we've learned to train throughout history. And I thought that that would be a great place to kind of kick us off into, how do we deal with this, right? So obviously it's not the dogs. Okay. We can train a lot of these dogs. A lot of these dogs that we've been speaking about, by the way, are of breeds that you would commonly find in the household. I mean, the dogs that we've just mentioned, whether it's search and rescue, police dogs, military dogs, hearing dogs, medical dogs, we're generally speaking about dogs that are very common. I'm talking about labs, okay, Labrador retrievers. I'm talking about German shepherds. I'm talking about like short hairs or pointers or even Cocker spaniels, like spaniels. We're seeing these dogs all over the place. And these are the dogs, and beagles, right? Beagles are some of the more detection and bomb dogs. These are dogs that you see in everyday households. So it really isn't the dog. If you're running into issues with your dog, it's more than likely you just haven't taken the time or studied some of the best tips or tricks to be able to do that. So I'm going to get us started right now. When you first get a dog, there's a lot of it's obviously an interesting process because everybody's extremely excited. There's a lot of hype around it. There's a lot of tension. There's a lot of anxiety about, what dog do we pick? Are we going to go with a puppy? Are we going to adopt a dog? How do we choose a dog that's right for us and our lifestyle? And I think that those are all really valid questions that you want to have great answers to, but eventually you will select a dog. And so the first few nights, especially if you go with a puppy, I think it's really important that you actually puppy proof your area that you're going to be bringing them home to. And for me, this meant removing anything that I didn't want chewed, peed on, like Matt. So if you're Matt and, you're in high school and you've just brought your first lady friend home, put her in the closet so that she doesn't get peed on at least. You don't want anything that they're going to poop on, because puppies do that too. And they honestly just don't know what not to pee on, what not to poop on to begin with, and what not to chew. So we're going to have to teach them that stuff. So simply put, make sure there's nothing valuable left around the house. I think that's really important before you get them home. You also want to make sure that there's nothing harmful to the dogs. Okay. Any type of one classic thing here, mouse traps, right? Mouse poison, insect poison, anything like that around the house is going to be very dangerous. Certain cleaning products as well, if you just have those laying around the house, are going to be very dangerous for your dog. So just get rid of that stuff beforehand. But when you first bring the puppy home, it's a violent and visceral experience for a number of reasons. Okay. The puppy has never been home alone. Okay. The puppy has probably grown up with its mother, okay, being constantly attached to the mother as well as the rest of the litter. So when you first bring a puppy home, it is extremely, extremely jarring to that puppy's normal behavior and really all that it's known for its entire life. Okay. So when you bring that thing home, it is going to make the worst and most heinous sounds that you've ever heard. And these are genetically programmed into us to hear. When you hear the wailing and the screaming of a puppy that's home for the first night away from its mom, you got to understand this is just evolution. This is genetics playing you. Okay. But don't fall for it. You have to let the puppy understand that it's in a new place. It's in a new home. It's going to get adjusted to your family situation and what you're doing. So there's going to be a lot of screaming. You're probably going to lose a lot of sleep. Okay, it's honestly very unpleasant, but we need to train and start layering on best practices and habits from the first night we get them home so that we can build a solid foundation for them and train them even better as they go. So one of the first things I recommend for your puppy is a crate. Okay, a dog really wants a habitat that resembles a cave or a den. And that's just how they've evolved. And so you can supplement or, give a better experience to your puppy by getting a crate, a small crate to begin with. So it should fit roughly their body as they stand up. Now, puppies are tiny, but in the first few weeks, they're going to grow quite a bit. So you're going to have to do a little bit of research and Googling to figure out what crate size is best for your length, width, and sort of weight of dog that you're getting. But for us, it was almost like a cat crate that we started it out with. So small crate, fill it full of blankets, make it like a den, super warm, super inviting, get the dog in there. And what you're going to want to do is sort of alternate throughout the day between playtime. So free time, playtime with the puppy. And then they generally pee, and they probably pee at an inconvenient time on your floor or something. Bring them outside every time as soon as they pee. So they've peed. Now you bring them outside. You teach them that outside's where to pee. And then you bring them back in. They go in the crate. So you've played, they've peed, back to the crate. And inside the crate, that's where they're going to fall asleep. Puppies sleep a lot. Okay. It gives you a little bit of freedom when you first get them. Once it's sleeping, it'll stay asleep for a little while. They don't sleep for a very long time, but they sleep a lot. So when it wakes back up, very first thing you do, take the dog outside immediately. So your crate should be located by your exit to the outdoor space that you're going to use for the puppy. So bring the puppy immediately outside. That's going to get your potty training started on the right foot. Okay. So as soon as you're out of the crate, right outside. Now we're starting to pee outside. The dog very quickly learns. I have a rather intelligent breed of dog. It's a working dog. So, they're just naturally got more natural ability. And this took no time for my dog. I mean, Mayday was peeing outside exclusively very, very, very quick. I would say within a month or something. So I think that was really good. Now, of course, if you're at Matt's place and he's got a rollout putting green for whatever reason, that's like the number one place he could pee. And so that would inspire some different behavior, but you work on that stuff. So crating is important as well. And you'll see in my show notes here, I've included a link back to our previous show on sleep. Okay. And why I included that link here on sleep is because if you are not crating your dog, you're going to have a dog in your bed. Okay. And that's bad for a plethora of reasons. I would think about body temperature, right? Because your body temperature's got to drop for you to have a great sleep. And I would also think about movement. Okay. So if your dog's in bed with you guys, cut that out. Okay. It's a really bad habit for you. It's not healthy for you or the dog really, because it inspires some separation anxiety, in my opinion. So stop doing that. Get yourself a good sleep. It's really important. And that brings me now to sort of the 7 common commands. So Matt, do you have an idea what the 7 common commands would be? Do you have an idea what maybe the most popular things would be to train your dog first?
I did look at the list, so this is going to be biased. Well, because you didn't tell me never look at your article, but I would have obviously guessed like sit, roll over, stay, heel, and I'm trying to think. I think there was one other one just when I was reading your list that I was like, oh, instead of no, I would have guessed drop.
Okay. Yeah, drop is one that I use as well, and it actually didn't make the list. So I'm glad you pointed that out. So here's a brief list of the 7 best commands to start with. And this is a list that I've kind of curated here and what we started training our dog. And one of the things that's not on here, as Matt just said as well, is like a rollover command. I didn't do any of those kind of like party trick commands with my dog. And again,
Oh,
yeah,
I was
go
just
ahead.
going to say, and shake is actually one that I would have guessed a lot of people focus on as well.
Yeah, and probably a lot of people do, and I'm going to tell you why I don't, is because I absolutely loathe when my dog uses her paw to communicate with me, like if she's reaching up and scratching at me. And one of the reasons for that is most of us have screen doors, right? If you have a sliding patio door at your house and your dog learns that type of action to paw at you is acceptable, I believe that would inspire them to further paw at other things like a screen door, which is something they could obviously destroy with their claws. So I despise that behavior. And if you have, women in your life, they wear tights, they wear, thin clothing that can easily be destroyed by that type of action. And I hate it. And the other thing is small children, right? If a dog does that type of action, especially a big breed, they can easily knock a child over. And so I don't believe in that shake a paw thing. I think it's nonsense. And the same thing with the rollover. I don't think there's any benefit. So I'm going to walk you through here this list of commands and why I decided that these were the most important commands. And I got to give some credit here to our man, Brandon McMillan. And we're going to watch a video from him in a short second here. So the reason why I think these 7 commands are really important are they're so multifaceted and they offer you a huge and wide breadth of foundation to build any other skills that you need from your dog on top of. So first command I like to start with, and in fact, I've actually numbered the commands and which order I start them in. So the first command that I like to teach is no. Okay. So this is a very slow process. And honestly, it won't work at the start, but it's a great place to start. And you're going to find yourself saying no a lot in the first few months I don't know, we're almost out of a year here and I'm still saying it all the time. So no is something you're just going to naturally start saying. There's no real best practice here. It's just like you have to start with that. The second thing I like to teach is come. And I'm going to play this video from Brandon McMillan. And you're going to see how we do some of this. But the come command is so useful if you have your dog, whether it's in the house or once you start bringing your puppy outside. The come command is so incredibly useful, whether that's to keep them away from strangers or other kids or cars or anything that's going on in your environment. Come is going to be a command that you use for life. And it's a really easy thing to start training because we're going to start using food in order to train. Okay. So I'm just going to quickly explain this and I'm going to then show the video and I'll allow you guys to sort of run through these various commands and then we're going to wrap up. So the come command, the way you want to train this is to use a clicker. Okay. So I explain this in depth in the Substack article. So if you guys want to read my in-depth sort of thoughts on this, I wrote 2,400 words or something on this. And so there's stuff that we aren't going to be able to cover today in this talk because we've only got an hour. Okay. But what I like to do is start with a clicker. And clickers, you guys may have never heard of a clicker before. And if you're interested in buying one, just go on Amazon, search up a dog clicker training, right? And it'll come up. They're very affordable. They might be like $10 or something like that. And what it is, just a little plastic tool, a little device, and you click it, okay? And it makes this like very distinct and loud popping sound. And it goes click. And what we want to do here, if you guys remember Pavlov, you guys remember Pavlov and the dog that sort of started salivating when the certain, I think it was a bell was rung. And our dogs are really smart. Okay. I got to tell you, they're really smart. We saw that with some of those service dogs, but they learn. Okay. They learn to positively associate the sound of that click with a positive behavior. And then they will intuitively know to repeat that behavior when they learn the behavior that you're targeting. So what you want to do is essentially say the command, click it at the same time that they actually do it, and then reward it with a piece of kibble. Okay. And some dogs may require a higher echelon of treat. Okay. With my dog, the route that I took was to feed as treats just the actual food that they were going to be fed anyways as part of their normal routine and diet. So how you do this, and I really don't want to give the wrong impression here. This is not an act of cruelty. This is not a exercise in trying to torture your dog. But what you're going to want to do here is have a little bit of food deprivation. Okay. Your dog needs to be food motivated and hungry in order to respond to this type of training really well. But I promise you, you're not starving your dog. You don't need to do this and really torture them. It just means doing your training when your dog is hungry. So ideally in the morning, first time they wake up, they've been sleeping all night. Ideally, they wake up, they're hungry, man. You're hungry in the morning. You get it. So when they first wake up, they're hungry. You take them out for their pee. They come back in. You begin a training session. Okay. Training sessions need to be short. They need to end on a successful repetition of the thing you're trying to train. So what you want to train and what we want to do here is get them food motivated. Okay. So food motivation for me, that means I don't even know what I've done here. For me, the food motivation, it's important, right? Because they need to feel stimulated by what you're offering. And so what I used to do is I took a 1 cup measuring cup, okay? Because my dog would eat, 1 cup when she was a really small dog, and then 2 cups. And then they sort of eat a cup for every month that they're old, up to about 4 cups, or in my case, 6 cups, because my dog's a beast. But take that measuring cup with a cup of food, and then you individually take 1 piece of kibble, okay? 1 at a time when they're successfully doing these reps. But first, you're going to start with the clicker, okay? So when I say charge the clicker, what this looks like is you're going to give the dog a click and a piece of kibble multiple times without any instruction or any commands. And that's going to let them associate the click and the sound of the clicker with food. So they're going to know right away, oh, okay, when he clicks, I get food. Okay, when he clicks, I get food. And you're going to do this multiple times, maybe 10, 12 pieces of kibble. They're going to understand, okay, click, that means food. Now, you give the dog a command. So something like come. Okay, if you're training come is very easy if the dog's food motivated, because what are they doing? You've just charged the clicker. They know there's food. They know that when you click it, they get the food. And now you walk away from them. Okay, so walk away from them. What do? They follow you. Okay. So they learn really quick that like they can get food from you. And so what you do is you say, come, and then you wait for them to come. You click the thing, you give them food. You say, come, right. And you repeat this process multiple times until one point in which you eventually give them what's called a jackpot. Okay. So the jackpot is you will want to give them the remainder of the food that they're allotted for that meal all at once. And again, ending on a successful repetition. So I'm going to show you what this looks like really quick here from Brandon McMillan. We're going to follow this external link here out on YouTube, and we're just going to watch about a minute of this. So Actually, I probably need to share my sound, so apologize for any lagging here for you guys. But here we go. We're going to watch this from Brandon McMillan, who is a former circus animal trainer and now like kind of world-renowned dog trainer.
Treat, it might sit for you. If the dog loves the treat, it will sit for you. Now I have a treat I know the dog loves. Step 2, I'm going to take the treat and hold it just above her head. I'm going to hold it just out of sight of her view.
This is training for sit.
If I hold it right here, she's going to be looking at it. But if I hold it above her head, she can't see it unless she sits. And then I'm going to stop her from jumping like that.
I see a bad habit here. What is she doing? She's almost sitting, but then she starts jumping for the treat.
So you never want to give the treat when she's up on her hind legs like that. So,
well, now you're about to see the power of the double leash lock off and exactly what it's good for.
the way we combat that is simply step on the front leash. Now when I say sit, it's actually going to stop her in her tracks. And I say sit, hold it above her head, perfect. Hold it for a couple seconds, good, that's a sit, perfect, perfect, perfect. Good, that's a sit, beautiful. Again, you want to hold it out of the line of sight, so if I hold it here, she can see it. Hold it here, she cannot see it until she actually sits down, and that's when we pay her. But again, she has a little bit of a jumping habit. Now I'm not going to step on the leash anymore because I think she's been conditioned. Full slack on the front leash, and I'm going to say sit. Good, I'm going to wait her out, see if she jumps. Good, that's a sit, beautiful, nice.
Now all I have to do is say the word sit and hold the treat above her head, and she sits for me every single time. Sit is now complete. She now...
Okay, so you saw an example there. I just wanted to stress one of the things he said is pay the dog. He said now we pay her. The best way to think about training dogs is through compensation. Okay, the dog is doing something for you. You need to reward that behavior. It doesn't always need to be food. And in fact, as your dog gets conditioned to some of these commands, they're going to stop relying on food and really just begin doing it for you, but you still need to pay them. And often that's as simple as a bit of physical contact, right? Showing the dog appreciation, showing them love, giving them praise. That's often enough pay for a dog to actually listen to you. But at the start, we need to do things like this. And he showed you another technique there called the double leash lock off, which is where you anchor, you put a leash anchored to the back. So pull in so that they can't run forward, jump around, go crazy. And then one anchored to the front so that you can stop them from jumping up. And they learn very quickly, that when they do a negative behavior, they don't get paid. But when they do the positive behavior that you're trying to compensate them for, they learn that that's something they can repeat and repeat for you, with stacks, right? They can come to you, boom, they get paid. They can then sit, they get paid. They can stay, they get paid. And you'll notice if you're watching this, I just use hand gestures. Those are the hand gestures that I use. So bonus points if you incorporate a hand gesture into your training. Now, I've included, and we're not going to have time to go through all of these, but I've included sort of my step-by-step process for you guys in the actual Substack article here for how you can teach your dog these 7 main commands. And that's going to get you all the way from no to come to sit to stay to down to off, and then finally heel. And I would teach these things in that order. And I do believe heel is one of the hardest ones. And heel is essentially what you're going to do to get the dog to stay with you on the leash so that they're not ripping your arm off. And let me tell you, this is a work in progress still for me. But we've got to the point now where Mayday, my dog, does understand the command and does understand that when she does it, she gets rewarded. I hope that this list is extremely helpful for you. And I hope that you can see how if you're able to teach your dog some of these strategies and tactics, your dog will actually allow you to have a higher quality of life. You want to have the freedom to bring your dogs out in public. You want to have the ability to give your dogs to other people if you need time, or if you need somebody to take them. If you have other obligations, you can't be with them. And a lot of these techniques, a lot of these commands are going to help you be able to do that. And, you know, some of these things, they seem kind of silly. Like, you know, why is it important that the dog stays? Well, it's very important because if you're taking your dogs with you out, say in a vehicle, and you open your door and your dog rushes out into traffic, that's very dangerous for the dog, right? They can obviously get hit by cars. And that's actually how a lot of dog incidents and accidents occur. The same thing for your front door. Okay. If your dog's used to rushing your front door, as soon as you open it, they sprint out. Very bad behavior that you can stop with stay. Okay. You can tell them to stay. They won't rush the door. And what does that help with? Well, car accidents again. Often people are very terrified of dogs sprinting at them outside of houses. So you can probably avoid some social issues. And more importantly, you can just be sure that your dog's going to be safe if you're not paying immediate and full attention to them. So, things like stay are really important. I would also really encourage the off command. And off is like that really terrible behavior when they're jumping up on you. They jump up and they put their front paws on you. That's a really dangerous behavior because, again, kids, okay, they can knock over kids. They can hit their head. Joe Rogan puts it this way a lot, and I really appreciate this analogy. If you fall even from a foot or two and the earth hits you in the head, it's not good. Okay. We have very soft tissue up in that little noggin of ours, and it's floating around in a tiny bit of liquid. And when that thing makes contact with your bone, it can lead to some big damage. So you don't want dogs knocking over your kids, and you also don't want them knocking over elderly people. Okay. If you got people with mobility issues, this is a very easy way to knock somebody over. So teaching these things is going to allow you to bring your dog out and into the world and into those social settings with you. And I believe that is one of the keys to being able to have the best day ever. Okay. You can't have the best day ever if you're constantly worried about your animal, your pet, embarrassing you, or even worse, hurting somebody that you didn't want them to hurt. So I think that is, it's important to train this stuff. And when you have an obedient dog, you will notice that you have a higher quality of life. You will notice that the people around you are happy to see you and your pets. You will notice that you can actually get out in the world and improve your lifestyle by walking your dog and just getting out into the community and meeting other wonderful humans that are out walking their dogs, or just out for strolls as well. And I've noticed that there's a really high social impact to having a dog. It obviously does force you to get out and be more active. So there's that element as well. But you run into people you otherwise would not likely have met. Okay. I've met a lot of really interesting entrepreneurs and business people and just generally positive people out on the trails walking my dogs. So I hope that this helps. And I know we didn't cover a whole lot about the actual tactics of training, but that's in the Substack for you guys. Go to the Substack, subscribe to that, and you can actually get my step-by-step training techniques that I use to successfully train my dog to do all these things. Again, I'm not an expert on heel yet, but by the time we retouch on this subject, or by the time you see me in real life, which we're planning on doing, by the way, my dog will heel. Okay. And she's going to absolutely sit, stay, go down, stay off of you. And she already knows the command no very well. So please, guys, I encourage you to look at some of this information and try and implement it into your life. And I think this is certainly one way you could get 1% better. And if we can do that, we're well on the road to having the best day ever. So Matt, I appreciate you sitting through my long monologue here today on dogs. I know that's not really your thing, but it's certainly a hobby that I'm interested in, and a lifelong commitment now for this dog. At least I've got one for 16 years, so I better improve its quality of life and mine at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I don't think you mentioned in the talk is, can you teach an old dog new tricks?
Yes, absolutely. There is great research that old dogs can learn new tricks, and that's also in my article. There is, in fact, an article or a resource there for you in the list of links that you can check out. Lots of research. You can absolutely teach old dogs new tricks. And, there's a fundamental pillar underlying that sort of sentiment, and it's patience. Okay. Like with everything else, we need to have great patience. And if you pick up a dog a lot, it's very trendy these days to pick up a dog from the shelter, right? Adopt a dog that's maybe coming from a war zone or coming from an unfortunate circumstance. These dogs will have different temperaments. They will have different life experience up to that point. And it's important to understand that, but you can work with that. And the number one thing to correcting some of their behavioral issues or challenges, or even just promoting new behaviors that you want, is building trust with them. And that's a big part of this, is you have to build trust with your dog. And the way we do that is not through violent interactions. Okay. Spanking your kids, probably not ideal. Spanking your dog, just as not ideal. Now, some corrections physically, they do work, but what I'm saying is on average, that shouldn't be your main tool. Your main tool should be positive reinforcement of great habits. And the way we do that is by compensating them. Okay. You wouldn't work for free. We shouldn't be expecting these dogs to work for free. And that's ultimately what they're doing when they're performing these little tricks or commands for you, is they're working for you. Okay. So remember to pay well, pay better than anything else around you. Okay. If they think a stranger is going to pay them better, right? If they're going to run up and be out of control because somebody else is in the room, it's because you haven't paid them well enough. Okay. So keep that in mind. Have a lot of patience for older dogs. Have a lot of patience for puppies because they're really dicks too. And then of course, pay well. Okay. So lots of love, encouragement, and sometimes food, right? If food's the motivator, then you can of course use a little bit of those training cues with the clicker, and as well with training at appropriate times when they are hungry. Another pro tip, just to kind of close off the conversation here, a tired dog, a dog that's well exercised is going to be a better dog. Okay. Works for humans too. Stress, anxiety, boredom, all of these things are things that dogs experience. And we're just mammals, man. We're all kind of the same thing. Dogs must have physical activity in their lives. All breeds are different. Certain dogs, like those little French bulldogs that are super popular these days, they don't need that much, but they still need to get exercise in order to be tired out. A dog that's not tired out is going to be very destructive and bored. And like I said, much like a human that has no purpose. So, take that into consideration when you're selecting a dog for yourself. And of course, once you get it, there's no rain days. Okay. You got to get out there. There's no avoiding it. Okay. The dog has requirements. You must meet those requirements. And if you want a great dog, you're probably going to have to go over and above. So that's just kind of my tip for you. But I do believe that they can fit in to our lifestyles. Okay. I'm a busy guy. Matt's a busy guy. If you're listening to this, you're the type of person that probably has a lot of things going on in their life. I get that. And dogs can absolutely be a part of that. But I believe that a high degree of training and ownership on your behalf, right? You need to take ownership of training the dog. This is going to be required. And that does actually include getting your family on board. Anybody that's going to be in the immediate circle of this dog, everybody's got to be aboard for the training. If somebody's letting the training slip, I know it's hard. It requires a lot of focus and attention, but if it's going to be that only one person in your household's willing to do the training, you're probably not ready for a dog. Everybody has to work on it.
Nice.
So, yeah. Well, thanks guys. I really appreciate you. And tomorrow, actually, Matt, if we want to tease tomorrow's show, would you mind filling us in on what to expect?
Yeah, so we'll have another set of news stories to cover with you guys, and we're going to do kind of a community hangout talking about movies.
Talking about movies. So if you guys are listening to this right now on the playback, or you've got comments, or you're in the Substack, leave us some comments. What are your favorite movies? We're going to be exploring that tomorrow on our community and culture show. So really excited to have you guys back, and I appreciate you all. And just remember, we're actively engaging in the Telegram chat as well as on the Substack. Talk to you guys later.
See you guys.
They say life is what you make it. So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day. No matter what the weather say, life is like a record, so just let it play.